What's up everyone? My name is the Ripper Danny B and welcome to my brand new series. This is Ripper's Recap and Review, the series where I take a look back at WWE programming, booking and storylines for the past month leading up to the next pay-per-view, and in this case of course that is Survivor Series. That coming up next. So it's been an interesting month in the WWE. We're looking at the build-up to Survivor Series, and ordinarily we'd look straight at the storylines. We'd look at the builds and we'd look at the booking. But there is one glaring elephant in the room we just cannot forget this time. Seth freaking Rollins. On the roll of a lifetime, Seth Rollins ended his 221-day reign as WWE World Heavyweight Champion with an injury at a live event in Dublin. Obviously, awful news. Seth has been in an amazing role so far. He has had a hell of a championship run. You look at the people he's overcome, I know you could put it down to bad booking, but at the end of the day, he's beaten icons, he's beaten legends, he's beaten the Beast. He's done everything there is to do. And to have the reign end in that way is just awful for Seth. But it is what it is. Before that, we were building to Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins at Survivor Series. And that's what the first 2 weeks of this cycle past Hell in a Cell was building to. Roman Reigns won the #1 contendership for the title in the first week after qualifying in a tournament-style matchup and winning a Battle Royal. He then went on to basically stick it to Seth the second week, all the while Seth Rollins was being rebuilt as Triple H's pick, the protege, the good boy, the leader of the NXT generation. And I was thinking as we looked into the second week before the injury happened, this was looking to be kind of a classic build. We knew who was going to be in the match, they made that very, very clear early on, and then they decided to build it a little bit. Roman coming down to the ring in week 2, just kind of, facing up to Seth Rollins. Very, very classic build. We haven't seen a lot of that in this championship reign because he's been thrown screwball after screwball after screwball basically, and this time it looked like we were going to finally build to a proper one-on-one championship match at Survivor Series, something we could all get invested into, and then it all went a bit bleh. Seth got hurt, the title was vacated, so that is Seth Rollins done. He has torn his ACL, his MCL, and he's damaged his meniscus. I can talk from experience here. I've had the very same injury happen. I've ruptured my ACL, MCL, and damaged my meniscus as well many years ago. I know the kind of pain that causes, and I know the kind of thing he's going through, but I'm no pro athlete, as you can probably tell just from looking at me. But I'm just sympathising with the man. It is a tough old injury. It makes it very, very hard to walk. Luckily, he was smart. He went for the surgery straight away. We could see Seth Rollins back within the next 6 to 9 months. Whether that means he'll make it back for Mania or not, you never know in this company. But all the same, I wish Seth Rollins all the best, and I hope he gets better soon. So after Seth's injury, it was announced that we would have a tournament for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, with the finals culminating at Survivor Series. Now, this is an interesting concept. Of course, tournaments are always fun. My main worry was that we were going to try and shove the entire tournament into one night, a la 1998. Luckily, that didn't happen. They've spread it out over the last couple of weeks. Roman Reigns, first of all, was offered to bypass the tournament by Triple H. Triple H looking for a new poster boy, looking for a new authority man. Roman turned it down. Now, that was kind of predictable. They're playing up Roman as this big old, I don't need your help, I'm tough brute, grr, arg. Apparently, if you believe the reports, maybe you can confirm this if you were in Manchester, but apparently the crowd did not like that decision and booed him for turning down the bypass, which was then filled in by piped-in cheers by the WWE by the time it hit television. So, yeah, make us believe what we want to believe, WWE. So then we kicked off with the tournament. Roman Reigns was in round 1, and he faced The Big Show. Really? The Big Show. So apparently The Big Show was the best that they could bring up for Roman Reigns. We've all seen Roman versus Big Show before. It's not a threat anymore. Big Show is not a threat to anyone anymore. He spent the last 15 years getting beaten by all men of all sizes. He's not a threat. Don't just stick him out there and go, oh, the crowd will buy into this because he's a big man. It takes a lot to overcome a big man. Not when Roman's done it like 13 times this year already. Think about the WWE. Didn't make a lot of sense last time. Didn't make a lot of sense the time before that. And it certainly doesn't make a lot of sense now. So predictably and unexcitably, Roman Reigns qualifies for the quarterfinals. And then they showed us the bracket. And this is where things started to really hit home. You've got to remember at this point, Seth Rollins is injured. Randy Orton is injured. John Cena is taking some personal time away from the WWE. Your 3 top level talents are gone. We fill in the tournament for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, and we see Titus O'Neil and Kalisto and Stardust and Tyler. What were they thinking? Seriously. I mean, Kalisto and Titus O'Neil especially had no place being in that tournament. I like both guys, do not get me wrong. I think they're both talented guys. Titus is a good powerhouse. He's definitely a phenomenal PR guy. And Kalisto is this little firecracker lucha. He's amazing. They're both tag team specialists. Neither have really had much of a singles career. Titus tried and he failed. He ended up in a tag team with Heath Slater. He's not a singles guy. Let's get that straight. So putting them in the tournament showed a massive gaping hole in the main event talent, and this is the problem they've had for a while. Stardust is still a bit of an odd choice, although at least he's been a solid mid-carder for a while now. And Tyler Breeze, I get it, he's new, we want to build some hype. The Kevin Owens situation, Kevin Owens came in, beat John Cena. The problem with Tyler is he didn't. If he'd have advanced to the quarterfinals at least, it would have given Tyler a bit of much needed momentum. Instead, it ended up just killing what he had made for himself so far since coming up to the main roster. So that was a bit of an idiotic move. Second match put the Intercontinental Champion Kevin Owens against Titus O'Neil. It didn't really take a genius to figure out it was Kevin Owens go over in this one, and he did. It was a fairly hard-hitting match, but it really wasn't world title tourney worthy. Regardless, Kevin Owens moves on to the quarterfinals. Next, we've had Dolph Ziggler versus The Miz. Now, this made more sense. And bear with me here. Dolph Ziggler obviously is a fan favourite. He is over with the crowd. He has always been at the top of the peak. He has always been that guy that is literally butting his head against the glass ceiling. So he made sense. The Miz might be a joke these days for the most part and hasn't really achieved anything important in about 4 years. But he is still a former WWE champion. When something like this comes up and you're a little short on talent, you pull from the talent pool. You've got a ton of ex-WWE and world champions that could have been pulled up. Miz is one of the best ones. So Dolph predictably went over Miz. It's a fairly solid match. We've seen it 100 times. Obviously, the Cleveland boys, they always come together every time the WWE comes to Cleveland. So we've seen that match 100 times, but it was still a decent match and a little bit more, acceptable of a world title tournament. Cesaro versus Sheamus. Again, Cesaro is the same point. He is a former United States champion and a former tag team champion, let's not forget that. Most importantly, he is one of the most natural and organic over guys on the roster today. He made sense to go up there. He's a big guy, he's got a lot of strength. He has proven that he can cope in most situations. Sheamus is the current Mr. Money in the Bank, and he's also a former World Heavyweight and WWE champion, so he made sense too. Now, as we predicted, Sheamus didn't go through. Cesaro managed it. That one was a decent match. It was hard hitting, it was brawling, and you could almost feel a kind of sense of want out of Cesaro in particular. So yeah, good match. And then finally, on Monday Night Raw, we had Dean Ambrose versus Tyler Breeze. Now, I loved this match because the contrasting personalities between Dean Ambrose and Tyler Breeze is phenomenal. Breeze is such a pretty boy. His whole gimmick is the supermodel thing. It's great. You compare that to the rough and rugged, kind of met him down a bar and bought him a drink, Dean Ambrose. that was a classic clash of styles, and I loved it. The particular moment when Dean took out Tyler on the outside, laid across the barrier, and just laid out with a smug look on his face as we went to the commercial break. That was beautiful. Dean Ambrose went over Tyler as we all expected, but it was a good match. Tyler kind of proving he belongs in the WWE, but as I said before, his momentum was slightly halted there by going up against Dean. Dean Ambrose goes through, he faces Dolph Ziggler next week. And that's how we rounded out Raw. We had the next 3 matches on SmackDown. We had the final 3 matches as Neville went over Barrett. I can't comment too much on the matches on this SmackDown because I didn't actually watch the show. I don't often watch many SmackDowns. Is this a SmackDown? But Neville went over Barrett, which was, again, mildly predictable, although Barrett really needs it more, man. Del Rio went over Stardust, which, if that hadn't happened, that would have been ridiculous. The United States Champion was not going to lose to a guy in face paint. Not that there's anything wrong with face painted guys, but when you're looking at the future of the WWE and the guy who's going to carry the brand through the next few months at least, Stardust is not your man to go to. And the shocker was Kalisto going over Ryback. I honestly thought that the way they push Ryback to the moon as well, they keep trying to push him up and up and up and up, and Kalisto went over him with, I saw the replay, it was a very, very cool Salida del Sol off the top rope. I like that move. It was a good shocking point to the tournament and kept us on edge, especially going into Raw. Now I have to point out before I move on, there was a very, very awesome moment on Raw that week. I want to point it out right now. Tyler Breeze was knocked down on the outside and all you could hear was this kid screaming, "That's what you get for picking on Dolph Ziggler." Shout out to you, kid. That made me laugh. So then we move on to round 2 and the brackets are starting to look kind of predictable now. You can kind of already see who's going through to Survivor Series and who isn't. We have it confirmed by this point that the semi-finals and the finals will take place on Survivor Series. So you can kind of already see where it's going from the remaining brackets. Kevin Owens was able to go over Neville, which was perfectly understandable. Owens has more place in the tournament right now than Neville. Neville really does need to kind of pull himself out of the man that gravity forgot gimmick, show he's a great technical wrestler. He's not a... Okay, don't let him talk. Just never let him talk. But he will get up there eventually. I hope he gets up there eventually, but for now it just wasn't his place. Kevin Owens needed this one and he went through, which he did. Great. In what could have been the only real shocker of the night, as in it could have gone either way, Dean Ambrose beat Dolph Ziggler. That was what we expected, but frankly I thought if they were going to pull a screw job of all screw jobs, it would have been there, where Ambrose lost to Dolph Ziggler. Didn't happen. They had a great match, those two. They mashed well together. They've got very similar styles. I mean, Dolph is far more refined and obviously Dean is a little bit uncouth, but they still meshed fairly well. It was a good match, and this was when Raw started to really pick up this week. For the first time in a long time, it started getting really kind of interesting as we watched the matches progress, because it became less about the tournament, which was predictable, but more about the matches that were happening in the tournament, the aim being to create some stars on the other side of it. In a case of it being very, very predictable, the next match was Roman Reigns and Cesaro. We knew Reigns was going over. That was a given. There is no way Roman Reigns isn't getting to the final of the tournament. But the match that he had with Cesaro was spectacular. And I am not going to put it any other way. He stumbled his words as he came down to the ring. He still shouldn't be on a mic. But in that ring, he is incredible. Cesaro, just as good, if not better. These two put on a clinic of a wrestling match. It was athletic, it was hard hitting, it was brawling, it was close on so many occasions without having to go for the false finish. There was no neutralizers, even though one was east, and there was no spears apart from the one that put Cesaro away. That is how you do a tense match without hitting each other's finishes 34 times. Take a lesson. And then we rounded it off with the far less exciting Kalisto versus Del Rio. As much as it was a good match, these are two very, very good luchadors. Kalisto is obviously more of your traditional luchador, small, quick, exciting. Del Rio has got a lot of lucha moves in him, but he doesn't use them as a heel. He doesn't like getting that response. You can't watch a decent lucha move being pulled off without, kind of really popping for it, so he doesn't do them. He goes for a very more grounded and technical style. Either way, we knew Kalisto wasn't going to go through. The Cinderella story was over. But nice little moment to have him there. It really was. So, as it pertains to the WWE World Heavyweight Championship title tournament, it's set for Survivor Series. Kevin Owens will face Dean Ambrose. Roman Reigns will face Del Rio. And the winners of those two matches will clash in the finals. I'm going to give my predictions in a minute. First, I want to give a couple of notes from the tournament. As I said before, the finals are predictable. And it is a shame because it is a real opportunity for the WWE to do something shocking, to do something spectacular. But they haven't. We are going to get Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose in the final. I will be very, very shocked if we don't. So, I mean, the shocking lack of main event talent at this point has really got to open their eyes. With Cena, Orton and Rollins missing, the only person they've got is Reigns. And he's not ready to be main event yet. Well, he is, but he hasn't quite crossed that boundary. Got to spend some time building your Kevin Owenses, your Dolph Ziglers and Cesaros, and really feeding in a pool of main event talent that can interchange and keep the storylines fresh and be there as backup when somebody goes out. I also want to point out the multiple injury angles that were pulled out during the tournament. And if you weren't watching, if you are watching this purely for the recap, then I'll let you know that there was at least 4 I can remember now. Reigns hurt his shoulder in both the tournament weeks. Ambrose hurt his arm against Tyler Breeze. Cesaro hurt his elbow in a match with Sheamus, and that injury continued all the way through to the match with Roman Reigns. And Dolph Ziggler was showing signs of shoulder and leg injuries as well. So it was a bit of a played and tested through system. A little too many. Enough to point out anyway. I know it's supposed to be a damage, we were damaged in this match and now we're going to be damaged later on, but it's spread over a couple of weeks, so, realistically, not quite so good. But it's just a small thing to point out. Also want to give the props to Kevin Owens. Throughout the tournament, he was showing why he is the heel in WWE right now. His mic work is beyond excellent. The guy can talk. He's not just a fantastic wrestler, he is one of the best talkers to ever step foot in a WWE ring. He was phenomenal, he was brilliant in England, he was brilliant in America, he got everybody to hate him, so well done to Kevin Owens for proving, once again, why he is the new guy in WWE. Also, if you didn't watch it, on Monday Night Raw this past week, there was a little slip-hap between Del Rio and Kalisto. It's not really got anything to do with the tournament, but I want to point it out for sakes. It kind of almost broke kayfabe. Del Rio accidentally pulled the mask off of Kalisto. We all know that's a big no-no. It's a lucha tradition. You don't pull the mask off. It was very, very obvious that Del Rio was doing everything to keep his face covered. You can't really do much about it. It was the situation that it was. The commentators played it up as much as possible, calling it as a heel work. But I just want to give props to Del Rio for, realising his mistake very, very quickly. The cameramen didn't do it very quickly though, did they? They've pulled away after about 30-40 seconds. They should have pulled away immediately. Panned out, gone to the long shot, but interesting moment that happened. Also I want to say at this point, the match of the tournament was certainly Roman Reigns versus Cesaro. The crowd were into it. It was a classic match, as I said just a minute ago. Epic, so props to them for that. Also, throughout the tournament, Triple H took the opportunity to try and butter up the heels. That's playing into the storyline of looking for a new puppet, looking for a new authority boy. Roman Reigns turned him down, and so now he's looking for a new pet. That allows him to kind of build the storyline to him and Seth Rollins later on down the line, a predicted WrestleMania 32 match if Seth is able to compete. Better to be safe than sorry and play the storyline now anyway. This way, Seth can come back and say, you obviously never cared about me, you were never interested in me, I was just your puppet, as soon as I'm gone you found someone new, what am I to you? And that gives Seth his face turn. It makes the whole match with Triple H believable, if it happens of course. And so yeah, that was a nice touch for them to kind of try and play into some of the storylines that, have been kind of slapped around because of this whole mess with Seth Rollins. So what are my predictions for the Survivor Series World Tournament Finals? Well, as I've said already, Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose are going to the finals. I will be very shocked if that isn't the case. What happens when they get to the finals? I have three things that are going to happen. One is the very, very, very predictable Dean Ambrose heel turn. This is the only way we can really get a decent face versus face match out of these two, is to have one of them go heel. Everybody's expecting it to be Dean, because why would they turn Roman? On the flip side, they could turn Roman. And that would be far more interesting, because every great champion, in my eyes, needs a heel run. If they turn Roman, it could be more interesting, but regardless. Number two, Sheamus. I have no idea what they are planning to do with his Money in the Bank briefcase. He could possibly lose his match. However, this would be a time to shake things up. Sheamus cashes in and succeeds, and sets up Dean and Roman and Sheamus for the next couple of months without having to turn anyone heel. And the third one, and this is the biggest outreach by a long, long way. We get the match, bang, 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 Roman, it. Triple H comes out at the end and goes, "Oh, by the way, I said to you, Roman, if you sided with me," I'm not going to do the accent. Triple H comes out and goes, "Hey Roman, you remember when I offered you a chance to go all the way to the final? Well, guess what? You were too stupid to take that offer. But not everybody's as stupid as you, Roman Reigns. Somebody was smart enough to take that offer." And he steps back, and Brock Lesnar comes out. He's got a championship match. He destroys Roman Reigns, gets his retribution for WrestleMania, and we have a champion going into the WrestleMania season. It's a long shot, but I think it would be pretty damn cool. For the most part, I see Dean Ambrose coming out with the title. That's just me. What else have we had to look forward to over these past 4 weeks? Well, the other big story, of course, has been the 25 years of The Undertaker in this Survivor Series. Undertaker debuted in 1990. He's been a constant presence in the WWE ever since, and have decided to celebrate him the only way they know how, dedicating the entire pay-per-view to him. Of course, when we first found this out at Hell in a Cell, we all got a little bit excited, because would that mean Undertaker is going to be at Survivor Series as well? He's already been on far more shows this year than he has been in 4 or 5 years beforehand. We're getting a lot of Undertaker this year. I know he looks good, he looks healthy, and I think that's why. It could also be due to the fact his retirement could come any time now. He's trying to get as much in as possible as he does. So we all thought he was going to be competing at Survivor Series. The question is, in what capacity? That was before the match with Brock Lesnar at Hell in a Cell. Following that match, of course, Bray Wyatt and his family surrounded the ring, attacked The Undertaker, and carried him off into the darkness, into oblivion, into some place where Undertaker can rest. Undertaker and Bray Wyatt were renewing their rivalry. It was fairly obvious at that point. So the next night on Raw, Bray Wyatt came out to boast about having destroyed the legendary Phenom, about having stolen his soul. Kane had something to say about that. He plodded his way down to the ring and stood up on the apron, and the lights went out, and there was the Wyatt family. Big trap. Kane was beaten down, taken away, just like his brother. Still going with brother. The night before. The following week, Bray Wyatt comes out to the ring, and he tells everyone that he's stolen the souls of the Brothers of Destruction. He's inherited their powers. He has become the new face of fear, the destroyer of worlds. Everything he has always said he's been, he has now become that. And he shows this off by causing lightning strikes and fire and pyro going off and boom and bang and such. Which leads us into Manchester Raw, where throughout the night promos were shown of legendary moments from The Undertaker's and Kane's careers, from their debuts to championship wins to WrestleMania moments. All followed up by an epic video package after Bray hits the ring, filled with the epic music, you know, kind of gladiator style. And then there they were. The Brothers of Destruction, reunited, returning to Raw and laying waste to the Wyatt family. And SmackDown that week, we'd all been speculating some form of traditional Survivor Series matchup. SmackDown, the match for Survivor Series, is set. A 2-on-2. The brothers versus 2 members of the Wyatt family of Bray's choosing. Which is a little disappointing, but it's still a Brothers of Destruction match, and you get what you can take, right? In fact, you might even take what you can get. And last week, The Undertaker and Kane open Monday Night Raw. They come out and cut a promo, which is not something they've done together for a very long time, and it was a real cool throwback. The purple lighting effect, it gave a very cool 90s style effect, and it was engulfing them, it making them feel dangerous and destructive, and especially in the case of Kane, who's been very watered down over the past 10 years, it kind of brought that level of ambivalence and destruction back to them, that gave that mysticism back to the Brothers of Destruction, something Undertaker never really lost. But it was good to have it together for the both of them. They both had their parts, they both got their lines in. Very, very cool moment. And then Bray Wyatt comes out. He brambles, and then he shuts off the lights, and the druids that had come out with The Undertaker are now all wearing sheep's masks. You kind of knew that was coming. Something was up when they came out down the ramp in the first place, because, you never see their faces actually covered up. They always wear very big hoods that cover them up. You always kind of get a chin. They've never worn the black kind of lycra face mask things before, so you knew something was up. But still, having them all in the face mask was very, very cool, and the sheep masks. And the brothers laid waste to them, as you'd expect. And that's pretty much how that ended. Also, let's point out, Eric Rowan got a new jumpsuit. At least he changes his clothes once a year. That segment ends with the Brothers of Destruction. They're looking powerful. They're looking like they could take down no matter whom Bray Wyatt puts in front of them. And to round it off on SmackDown, they cut their Videotron promo, and the iconic image of Kane setting fire to the sheep mask. That was cool. Nice classic throwback. We've been built up strong. It started out with Bray Wyatt carrying the feud. It ended up with The Undertaker making up the star power. And it's been a very, very cool build, because it started at the last pay-per-view. It's going to culminate at this one. It's had the longest time to really kind of sink in. The problem I have with it is the whole idea was brilliant. Bray Wyatt destroying the Brothers of Destruction, taking their powers, taking on their legacies. But then they were back next week. It would have worked great as a long-term storyline. But as they did the best they could with the time they had. It was only a 4-week build. They did what they could. But that would have worked great over a long term. Bray continuously building his monstrous power. His family taking over WWE. And then 4 or 5 months down the line, they're back. Boom. Massive impact. But all the same, they did what they could with the time they had. It was a great kind of short-term storyline. I mean, the most important thing to note, more than anything, is Bray Wyatt's promos. They have been absolute gold this past month. I mentioned before about Kevin Owens and his heel work. He's been great, but Bray has had everyone in the palm of his hands the entire month. Every time he speaks, doesn't matter what city they were in America, or even when they came to England, into Manchester. Manchester is a ruckus place, believe me. If you're not from England, you don't really know, but Manchester is a ruckus place. They're not quiet people. I'm not offending anyone here. They are just that way. We all are that way. British people are that way. And even each and every person in that Manchester arena was silent when Bray Wyatt spoke. He has that power to just draw you in, make you listen, and he has been just passionate. He has been forthcoming. It has just been brilliant month of promos from Bray Wyatt. That's his real strength. That is where his mysticism lies. If you can keep that momentum up, that's how Bray Wyatt is going to rebuild himself as the years go on. And it's been an interesting kind of storyline, because this is 2015. The whole idea of stealing a soul, making things light up with the power of your mind, that all kind of thing is dead. They've spent the last 4 weeks treading that line. When you bring in The Undertaker, when you bring in the Brothers of Destruction, you kind of already suspend disbelief anyway, because we know Undertaker's mortal, but we don't treat him that way. He's kind of reached a kind of living immortality. And that has spread throughout onto Kane, onto the Wyatt family. And it allowed us to kind of tread back and forth across that line of kayfabe just enough suspension of disbelief to be wrapped up into it. Something that WWE hasn't done properly for years. What made the Attitude Era work was the suspension of disbelief, and Bray and Taker brought that out of each other this month. And it gave it such an amazing feel, a passionate throwback and yet very modern feel. It was great work from all of them. So all in all, my prediction for the Survivor Series match, I still see a surprise coming. I don't know what it is, but I do see it coming. As the match is, if Bray Wyatt participates in the match, they are going to win it. The Wyatt family will win it. They need it, The Undertaker and Kane don't. It's as simple as that. Braun Strowman is almost a lock. He is the powerhouse. He's never been pinned. He's barely ever been knocked off his feet. So he's in. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to put Eric or Luke in with him, so I imagine Bray is going to go in himself. And if he does, Bray Wyatt will win the match. Possibly by pinning The Undertaker himself, avenging his WrestleMania loss. However, if Bray doesn't compete, I see The Undertaker and Kane winning it. Possibly by pinning Braun Strowman, just to get that element out of the way. And so the other big storyline over the past 4 weeks has been the Divas Championship match. Paige versus Charlotte. Now this didn't start out well. Let's make that point. As we came off of Hell in a Cell, the issues were already showing between Charlotte and Becky and Paige. And they chose to ignore them. They chose to pal them up together, go out there as a team, and then Paige turned on Becky and Charlotte. Duh. It was coming. We could all see it was coming. But it was only a very tentative turn. She took them all out and then she walked away, and then the next week there was just a lot of talking in the Divas Revolution. A lot of talking. And then we had a fatal 4-way match to determine the number 1 contender, who was obviously going to be Paige. Not really giving us our dues as fans here. We're more intelligent than that. It would have been far more organic if they'd have just let Paige challenge Charlotte to a one-on-one match and just let it build naturally. No, they had to stick a stipulation match in the way. I'm assuming it's just to make sure Brie Bella had something to do this month. Nikki being out the way, she's, don't hate me, but kind of irrelevant. That's the only thing I can think. Or writers just not thinking that we can remember more than a week's worth of storylines at a time, which seems to be a common problem. Sort it out. Although I'm maybe being a little bit harsh, because the match was actually pretty good, that fatal 4-way match. The double superplex powerbomb spot was pretty cool. It was actually some good Divas work, so maybe I'm being a little bit harsh. We wouldn't have gotten that match if we would have gone naturally organic. But what's the sake of one match for an entire storyline, you know? And then following Paige's appointment as number 1 contender on the following Raw, we have Paige versus Becky Lynch. Becky trying to get some retribution for Paige turning on her. Which makes sense, I guess. Basically, the entire match was for Paige to cement her heel turn by attacking Becky post-match, putting the PTO on Becky on the announce table, which looks cool, but I don't think having her on the announce table hurts any more than having it in the ring. Becky doesn't even touch the floor in the PTO. No one does. So, yeah. It was just for cool effect. But whatever, it worked. Charlotte makes the save, and now we have our very good girl, bad girl dynamic. Which is fine. It's nothing special. We're actually kind of quiet on the Divas title front that week. That's basically the only spot we got. But the next week it really came into its own, and the feud intensified massively. Throughout this past Monday's Raw, they built to the contract signing between Charlotte and Paige all the way through the show. From the very beginning to the end when they got the main event spot to do the contract signing. It's a contract signing, for God's sakes, it's going to go wrong. So we've got them out, Paige came out looking all, you know, I'm a badass. Sits down, puts her feet on the table like a good badass should. Charlotte comes out, she's all prissy, you know, this is definitely the way they're doing it. Charlotte is the hardcore good girl, Paige is the hardcore bad girl. They're two tough ass divas who can fight, who can compete, but now don't like one another. And then we were treated to a sob story. Tricky one, sob stories kind of alienate a lot of male fans. because we just don't get emotionally invested into, we were once best friends, now we're not best friends anymore, now we don't like each other, but I still kind of like you, but you're just mean now. That's kind of a tried and tested formula, especially with the women, and it almost felt dangerous for a minute until she brought up her brother. Now that is when it got interesting. Any hardcore fans like myself, we know the name Reid Flair. We know his story, we know he tragically passed a couple of years ago. Charlotte bringing that up, and that brought out some true emotion in her. You could see it in her eyes, you know, having to think about, you know, a brother she's lost. That was painful. It got everybody a bit emotionally invested, and it gave Paige the fire she needed. She fought back, and then came that moment, and she said, "Your little brother isn't fighting anymore, is he?" That set Charlotte off. Rightly so. Bitching brawl ensued. Absolutely kicked the living monkeys out of one another before Paige got away and they did the stare down. So now it's set. 1-on-1, Paige versus Charlotte, Divas Championship match at Survivor Series. Was that line really necessary? I know what they were going for, that really deep, digging personal attack. We've seen it done many, many times, but this was based in real life, and it was based around somebody's death, prematurely so as well. It might have been too much. I know the WWE have come out since, and if you didn't know this already, they've come out and made a statement saying they wouldn't have done something like this without the consent of the talent themselves. Essentially saying Charlotte said it's fine to make that call. Ric Flair has turned around and said he didn't know anything about that coming up, but he understands the position Charlotte's in. It's the WWE, she's still fresh, she's still going to say yes to everything. Whatever the politics are behind it, it was said, it was incredibly underhanded, but sometimes you've got to go for that effect. Sometimes you've really got to drive it home. We're trying to find a way to care about the Divas again. The whole Divas Revolution thing has flopped. We've got to find a way to care again, and getting in deep, getting in personal. That's what made Trish and Lita such a good feud all those years ago, because it was personal. They were trying to one-up each other every step of the way. We could see some of that from Paige and Charlotte, depending on how far this feud goes down the line. If we forget about it after Sunday, well, what was the point? This one has to continue, and it has to be a good one. Does it matter who wins at this point? No, but the feud has to go on. Otherwise, going that deep, that dark, is for nothing. I've heard it before, what is the sake? One moment at the expense of a feud. All in all, the Divas progression was a bit slow to start. It just didn't feel organic, it just felt like they were insulting us. The breaks from Paige, Becky and Charlotte were happening before Hell in a Cell, and then they weren't afterwards, and then they were again. It just kind of felt really stupid, really laboured, kind of felt like they just wanted to reset. But it ended up working out well. If they'd have had 3, maybe 4 weeks to build that, it would have been classic, it would have been epic. The payoff at the end of Raw would have been amazing, but they did a very good job. And for once, I'm invested in this Divas Championship match, just simply because it feels like it's worth caring about. These two have managed to get under each other's skin, and this is where the revolution lies, not in 9 women triple threat tag team matches, or, you know, one particular woman breaking a record that she shouldn't have broken. No, it's about the title for the first time since Sasha, Becky and Charlotte were called up, and that is interesting, and this could be a good sign of how the title goes towards WrestleMania. So, all in all, it has been an interesting build to Survivor Series. There's been a few cogs in the work this month. Obviously, Seth Rollins' injury has changed a few plans up, that was obvious. Such feuds we saw starting to build as Cesaro and Stardust, that seemed to get scrapped. Dolph Ziggler and Tyler Breeze, that seemed to go away as well. Del Rio and Jack Swagger, that seemed to float away as well. We kind of saw some of them come back on SmackDown after the finals were decided, the quarterfinals were decided. We saw a bit of an exchange between Cesaro and Stardust, and Dolph Ziggler kicking the pretty face off of Tyler Breeze. Maybe they'll play back into that, but I don't think they have time during Survivor Series to reignite those feuds, so we'll just set all those back another month and deal with them at TLC. The New Day have been very, very interesting as well. None of them were in the tournament, but there's been no real contenders for the tag team titles announced. I don't know if that means we're not going to have a title match at Survivor Series. It's possible, but especially with the Usos returning, you would have thought they'd start building again. The Lucha Dragons were taken out of the mix with Kalisto going into the tournament, but I would have figured a good Usos New Day build would have happened by now, and it kind of hasn't. It's been left to the side, so we might see that next match. We may even see an impromptu title match happen at Survivor Series. We can only wait to see on Sunday for that. But it is surprising how underused New Day have been. They are quite possibly the hottest commodity in WWE right now. So surprising that they've allowed themselves to just kind of flop down a bit. Also, what on earth does Harry Potter sucks mean? Kofi, no. Just no. Also, this past week on WWE.com, there has been a traditional Survivor Series elimination tag team match announced. No participants have been announced as of yet. So maybe some of the guys I just mentioned, your Cesaro, Stardust, your New Days, your Usos, maybe they're going to be involved in that. Maybe there's going to be a few new surprises. The fact that they haven't announced the participants means one of two things. They are deliberately keeping it from us, or they don't know yet. They just want to get one in. It's kind of cool to make sure we get one in, because we've only missed 2 traditional Survivor Series matchups in the history of Survivor Series. So it's kind of cool to get one in, no matter who the participants are. They're always fun to watch. I'm hoping for a surprise somewhere along the way. Who isn't? But we are more than likely just going to see a team of Usos versus New Day or something like that. As what is announced for the pay-per-view goes, as well as that traditional Survivor Series match, if you factor in the quarterfinals, the finals, the Divas Championship, and the Undertaker and Kane versus the Wyatt family match, that's 6 matches announced for the card so far. There could be one more. There is time to squeeze one more in, especially since there's been nothing announced for the pre-show yet. 7 seems to be the average for a 3-hour show at the moment. So, yeah, maybe we've got time to fit one more in. Maybe a tag title match. Who knows? If we do stick to the 6, that feels good to me, because that means we're going to get a bit more time on the matches that are going to need them. So, especially the main event. We need a good, solid title match finish main event. Especially if it is Roman and Dean, because they're going to need that to kind of just step up to that next level and stay there permanently. Speaking of JBL, he did tell us to try this at home this week. That was hilarious. As Roman Reigns picked up Cesaro, JBL said, "You try doing that at home, folks." Michael Cole had to come in and correct him a minute later and say, "We advise you don't try this at home. We leave it to our trained professionals." JBL, you moron. So in conclusion, to my very first Rippers Recap and Review show, has it been an interesting build to Survivor Series? Has it been worth the wait? Are we excited for the pay-per-view? Well, I am. On top of the WWE Network's Undertaker Week for only $9.99, which has been a great kind of retrospect of The Undertaker's life. If you know who Undertaker is and you've been around with him for a long time like I have, the stuff with Legends with JBL and things of the like were interesting. If you're new, if you've not really gotten to know The Undertaker that well yet, there was some stuff on his greatest matches and his history and such, which was pretty cool. The tournament has proven to be intriguing, or if not a little predictable. The Divas Championship match has gained some momentum, it's gained some steam, it's kind of emotional and it's deep. I see Charlotte winning that one, by the way, I didn't mention it beforehand. But the feud of the month has to go to the brothers versus the Wyatts, but I guess that makes sense because it's 25 years of The Undertaker. So this has been your first episode of Rippers Recap and Review. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe, and I shall see you Tuesday for the review of Survivor Series. Take care.